Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Bitcoin Not Crypto weekly live stream every Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm Forrest Hodel, and we always start with a little bit of a subject here. We always actually start with some free Bitcoin for you guys and then the subject. So let's do that first. So this is courtesy of the Bitcoin Well. For the first comers to the show, you have a really great opportunity here to win some Bitcoin. First person to scan the QR code that's about to appear on screen here will win some sats, and you scan that with your Lightning wallet, whether it's Wallet of Satoshi or Coinos, what have you. 375 sats for the first person to scan this one. We're going to do one more here, and then we're going to get into the subject. And this show is a Q&A. So if anybody has any questions about Bitcoin, news, anything, you just share that in the comment sections or in the live chat, and we'll get to it. What's up, Naughty Vlogs? Nice to see you. And yeah, I'm gonna have to catch up on your videos. Released some decent ones last week, in my opinion. A tutorial that I think was heavily needed to help people update their firmware and reset their jades. There was a vulnerability found in the Blockstream Jade. 476 sats to whoever scans this one. Pretty simple fix, and nobody has lost any Bitcoin from this vulnerability. But yeah, you know, it's good to make sure that you have firmware up to date, especially when something like that comes up. All right, so got a few people in the chat. Again, ask away and we'll get to it. But the title of the show today is what a lot of people are talking about. It's what my entire X feed is just totally consumed by, which is silver, not Bitcoin, right? Silver is stealing the spotlight. And this has actually been kind of interesting with Bitcoin in general. Bitcoin had a moment there, like I think, what did it go up 100 and something percent after the ETFs were launched. I think it was, yeah, ETFs were, maybe it was around 40K or something like that. And then the ETFs came out. It was a bit of a sell the news. And then after that, it just, pushed Bitcoin's price up. Now, one thing that is taken away from Bitcoin's spotlight during this bull run has been other investments, right? The AI trade has been something that people have been looking at for years now, since basically 2021, 2022 is when the AI trade, I think, came out in a big way. People were kind of looking for names there, Microsoft, NVIDIA, obviously, other ones as well. And that took some investment capital away from people that would have invested. Like, the people that were investing in AI are also looking to invest in, Bitcoin, crypto, this kind of stuff, right? They're looking for high flyers, short-term trade type deals, whether that's swing trading or even multi-year, but still looking at it like a trade. And now we are having a commodity play, a commodity mixed with a precious metal money narrative, which is very interesting, right? So that's silver that I'm talking about, right? This little, 50-cent Canadian piece here from 1965 actually has silver in it. And this is sort of the concept of it being money, right? It wasn't that that long ago, 1965. And this coin that you would get from change, this isn't from a commemorative set or something like that is silver. This was change. You'd go get your groceries and you would get some silverback gorillas. And that gave value to the money itself and had some scarcity, desirability, and history of money to it, moneyness to it. Now, what's very interesting here is the silver is skyrocketed, right? And we're going to kind of figure out what the narratives are after the fact, right? It's already made a massive move, and people are now constructing narratives to figure out why that happened or to justify the move itself, right? And I think that ultimately it's a combination of many things. Sorry, just dropped my silver coin. It's a combination of many things, but silver was interesting to me at a point. Again, basically in 2022, Clear Value Tax. He's a YouTube guy. He talked about silver for a while, and I got interested in it. I bought a bunch of paper silver. I have a whole bunch of silver coins and shit just from being a coin collecting kid. Super annoying. I move around way too much, and carting around that silver is so annoying. Anyway, it's worth a lot now, comparatively. And I'm happy that I have it now, but it's still a pain in the ass to get rid of and to sell spot and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, owned some SLV back in the day, 2022, I believe it was. And my thesis with that was essentially the Green Deal, right? All governments around the world are all looking to increase renewable energy, solar panels, electric cars, building out the grid, 5G towers, all of this. Basically, everything we do, even cell phones, have an amount of silver in them, considering that silver is the most conductive metal, I believe. I don't know if it's the most, but it's highly conductive, more conductive than copper and silver. So it has uh, copper or gold. Pardon my uh, uh, slip up there. Um, so that was my narrative. That was my concept, and I think that's partially what's at play right now. Is with the continued build out of all this AI infrastructure. All of that has a degree of need of silver as well. I think there's also been this sort of short interest on silver from hedge funds and banks and such that has been lifted, and now they are moving with the long end of it. So the sort of price suppression that was happening has flipped to the other way, and now they're riding it up in price. So there is natural demand, and that was sort of what actually took me out of owning silver. Was I at the time believed that it also had a monetary use case, that silver was hard money. But after learning about how abundant silver is, basically, that at certain points, there's going to be the ability to release more supply, whether that's through recycling or increasing the current mining operations or adding new mines. Eventually, supply will catch up with demand. It could take years. Silver could be a good trade for years, but eventually supply will meet demand. This is not the case with Bitcoin, right? So as I got more familiar with the Bitcoin, I owned Bitcoin at the time, but I had a diversification of all sorts of different assets. And the hard moneyness of Bitcoin beat out the narrative to me of the combination of some hard moneyness with silver and an industrial use case. Now, I would have done really well having been in silver, but again, I see something that is an industrial metal as having a real cycle within it, and it being a much more short-term thing. And I mean short-term as in like 3 years, right? I think that this run with silver could last years. I think the run with gold could last years as well. The price action looks ridiculous, but it's sort of a sign that something is breaking within that market. Right. And it's really just outstripped them. It's demand outstripping supply. And eventually, though, that will level out and the prices will equalize. Now, do I want to hop on the train? The way I look at it with a trade, the way I always look at it with a trade is that there's a window that's open and it's closing. And I don't know how fast it's going to close. I think that silver could retrace because it's gone so parabolic. And that would be sort of the fast closing of that window. But that window could take years to close. And silver could be a good trade for those years. With Bitcoin, however, somebody punched a hole through the wall, and that window, there is no window. There's no window of close, and people do treat it like there's a window that closes and they trade it and whatnot. But since the principles of Bitcoin, the values, the underlying use case and sound moneyness of the Bitcoin protocol uh, means that supply will never catch up to meet demand. Now, we have seen a curtailing of demand, right? And that's really the variable that can adjust, right? Is demand, and then that's going to affect price. But supply is incredibly rigid. And people are buying silver. Some people are buying silver with the thesis of it being sound money. And I just don't believe that silver is sound money. I think it's more sound than fiat, obviously. The production can't be wrapped up. Like I've heard estimates of it taking 5 to 7 years to get the regulation to do silver only mining. A lot of silver is actually just a byproduct of nickel and lead and copper mines. And those mines might take a little bit of time, months, maybe years to ramp up production as well and extract silver out of their tailings, and becomes more profitable to do so. But I think a lot of the supply will come from already silver holders, just as the supply, right? The Bitcoin supply can only come from holders because only 450 new Bitcoin are mined per day. So the supply is incredibly rigid of new Bitcoin. So the reason we've seen Bitcoin fall is because old holders have been selling right into the market. So I kind of think the same thing could happen with silver, right? And I look at all sorts of investments as what are their risk profile. And there are so much complexities to the current environment of silver. I do think the narrative of demand for silver in industry is compelling, but I also see that being a massive problem, right? So there's kind of the problem of silver being an input cost to all these things that we need, right? And all these things that are the underlying profits of tech companies, which are the majority of what people invest in, right? So if somebody's investing in Tesla and all of a sudden the silver in the electric vehicle goes up in cost, that means the margin that they make from selling that vehicle goes down, which means what are they going to do? Either become less profitable, which means their stock will take a hit, or they will pass that on to consumers, which is consumer price inflation. And then that price inflation gets seen in the market. And then what does the Fed do? Do they hold rates because of this price inflation caused by commodity price increase? Or do they continue lowering rates? Do they start back up the QE that they're planning to do to basically buy assets, to create easy money, to create more stimulus in the economy? I mean, there's so many variables here, uh, even for, and there's a lot of, there's all this like global trade tensions where there's you know, certain countries have lots of silver, but they're not willing to part with it because they're, the allies between nations have been a little bit, again, tumultuous. There's so many variables here, and I just don't like getting involved in something that I don't understand. So I am not stepping into silver. I am thinking about selling the silver, the physical silver that I have. And I think that I'm not alone there. I think a lot of people will see these prices and think, I held silver for 10 years. It did absolutely nothing. It's now tripled overnight. I'm going to sell some. I'm going to sell my old 50-cent Canadian piece. I'm going to sell my silver dollars I have, whatever silver stack that I stacked during my time of, thinking the government was going to collapse, whatever, right? I think that just like what we had with Bitcoin, where old holders came out of the woodworks and became the supply. I think the same thing is going to happen likely with retail. Um, and I think there's going to be a little bit of an illiquid market until that gets seen, right? Because the infrastructure has to be built up. Is your local gold and silver dealer willing to accept massive amounts of silver right now? Are the melting the furnaces or the smelters or whatever they're called, are they willing to accept your silver right now, and at what prices? Is this driven by paper, silver? Is there actual legs to this? And I don't know enough about it to be an investor. But what I will say is the commodity aspect of this is one thing, right? If investors start looking at silver and thinking about commodities and thinking about, okay, well, this is good because there's going to be a shortage in silver and there's a demand for it, right? Because we're not slowing down on electric vehicles or electronics in general. Um, and maybe that's true. Again, I would say, well, maybe they can substitute silver for something else, and maybe that's true as well to some degree. But if the narrative of silver being hard money continues to get pressed, I think that will lead people to Bitcoin, just as it did with me, right? I owned silver for the monetary narrative of it, and I recognized that that narrative had major flaws, especially compared to other assets. Even gold, right? Gold is more scarce. The stock to flow ratio is better with gold. The Basically silver's been demonetized, right? And the peg that it historically had is completely off. And I think it's highly unlikely that silver becomes remonetized, right? Which is what is kind of happening right here, right? Like, is the natural industrial demand there for this, for this commodity silver, or is this monetary premium being added onto silver, which I believe is unjustified, right? Uh, if it's monetary premium being added, if the silver prices isn't going up because of more industrial demand, then it's monetary demand, right? It's people buying it, believing the monetary narrative of it, and I think that narrative is a lot of hot air. I think, again, it has some degree of moneyness. It has some degree of scarcity, some degree of soundness, but it is not as good as gold. It's not as good as Bitcoin. So that narrative begins to fall apart when you look at the alternatives. And I think that some people could get into this because of that and begin to have a better understanding of moneyness, which could lead them to Bitcoin as well. So all roads lead to Bitcoin. And I'll just kind of round this off. I know I've been kind of rambling, going all over a little bit, but I'll round this off by saying that silver could be a good short-term trade, but I'm not interested in short-term trades. I'm interested in the monetary revolution that Bitcoin can create, that silver cannot, that gold cannot, right? These both as metals have failed as money. Nobody is going and using this for its silver value for anything, right? And people will say, well, very few are doing that with Bitcoin too, which is actually true. However, it is entirely possible, and the protocol has been built to do that. People are just not willing to because of this dumb narrative that certain influencers push, which is, don't never sell your Bitcoin. If you sell your dollars for a good and service, it's the same as selling Bitcoin. Maybe not, tax efficiently, but it's the same because those dollars could have been gone towards buying Bitcoin. So as soon as a few things get figured out with Bitcoin, and mostly it's this arbitrary regulation around it, as soon as those things get adjusted and the narrative changes to, yeah, let's spread some of this Bitcoin around because it creates more of the network effect and more people actually using it, even if it is a store of value for the person that you give it to in exchange for goods and services. This creates the opportunity for Bitcoin to become money beyond a store of value. Whereas that is just not going to happen with silver or gold. just plain isn't, right? It's incredibly inefficient to do that, whereas Bitcoin is incredibly efficient to do that. So one of those has the potential to become a medium of exchange, which is Bitcoin. The others do not have the potential, in my opinion. They have actively failed at that in history, and there's no going back to that, right? There can be paper currencies that are more or less backed by the value of the monetary metals that a nation might have, but you're still, this is a crazy derivative third party uh, token of something else, right? Which absolutely makes no sense. Why not just have the actual unit, which is Bitcoin, be used as your money? All right, so that's about it. I do think that a lot of this, we'll figure out more and more about the narrative of silver, of what is happening. I think it's been a combination of the things that I talked about, and I think that it could cause problems if it was prolonged enough, because the input costs of the basically the margin and profits of certain companies will get affected, and this could get pushed onto consumers, leading to higher prices, and that could be cause for tighter monetary conditions, and that would largely affect Bitcoin negatively. But I do think that that overall, this is going to lead more people to question money. It's going to lead more people to understand the monetary network of Bitcoin, and therefore, in the long run, lead to Bitcoin's price going up, which is what people care about, right? A lot of people, the vast majority of people that are in Bitcoin care about the price going up. To me, that is totally secondary or thirdary, which is not a word, but I want fair money. I want a fair system. I want to live in a world with deflationary prices. I think it's better for not just me as a Bitcoin holder, but for every single other person in the world to not have a money that is controlled by a central organization. Right? People talk about uh, socialism being bad and communism, all this shit. It's central planning, right? That's what those uh, societal organizations is a sort of a central planning that does not actually work for the individual. That's what we have with money, right? We have a central bank planning the issuance of our money. This is central planning for arguably the most important thing in the world, which is money. Since everything else can be created or destroyed because of money, right? Money is incredibly powerful. You can spend money to to exert somebody else's energy for your goals, whatever that is. And so to have something so powerful issued by, um, here's one of these things, right? This thing is plastic nonsense, right? It's not that far away from this, in my opinion. This has more money principles than this, right? There's no cost of production with this, and there's even less with a digital sum, right? For some reason, we got this old bag on here. Apologies for making fun of somebody who's dead, but um, yeah, just it makes no sense. It makes no sense to be using these things as money. Silver makes a little bit of sense, but Bitcoin makes all the sense. All right, so I'm going to get to some of these questions here. Hate to say it, but Peter Schiff has been right at least this year. I think that's a really good caveat within there. And people, again, people will have their moments, right? People will have their moments of being right, but is that really important when you have a long-term vision? I don't think so. Like Schiff believes, I mean, what does he even freaking believe? That gold is going to become the base layer of money. He's going to tokenize gold. The like the only way gold really functions as money again is if we have a massive EMP that literally destroys all electronics. We go back to like next, people are bartering and guns and ammo and silver and gold. with the hope of rebuilding a civilization after a massive catastrophic internet and electricity grid destroying thing, and also destroying all the knowledge in the world too, to be able to rebuild this, but having the hope that the history of these metals and the scarcity of these metals become valuable into the future as well, whatever that future holds in this crazy dystopian world. Like that is the that's the narrative. Like people might not have that exact narrative that are gold bugs, but behind all of that is that concept to some degree. So it just doesn't make any sense to me. That's just not the world that you should be planning for because the risk of that world is not even a tail risk. It's so small. I think it's too complicated for the average Joe. Silver and gold's simple and easy to understand. Yeah, I guess so. Incredibly annoying to use. Bitcoin's incredibly easy and simple to use. What was the vulnerability? I heard kind of about it, but I've been out of town and not on social media. This is about the Jade, right? This guy here. I think the vulnerability was, what was it? It was the, I'm just going off of memory. I did read the blog post that Blockstream posted. It was something about the ability to. It was because of the Oracle signing and initiating of the device. Since there's no secure element chip in the Jade, it connects to an Oracle, like a blind Oracle. And there's the ability. There was the vulnerability of a hacker being able to interrupt that in some way and possibly delete data on your device, considering there's no secure element, or potentially transmitting that as well to themselves. And again, I don't believe that any of that actually happened. It's just the possibility of it. There was not the possibility, but there was the ability to have done that the third-party auditor found. WorkSafe Bitcoin, how's it going, man? Happy holidays. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Hope everybody's holiday season was good. Mine was great. I think it was a lot of fun. I think silver and gold are only doing good because banks are using it to hedge against inflation because they know they are going to need to print. Yeah, and that could be true as well, right? There's the sort of, we saw the gold rush, and a lot of that was from central banks, and they're needing a neutral reserve asset, and now silver is sort of catching up to that to some degree, maybe even blowing past it. It's an interesting story, right? And again, I think that we'll find a lot more information about that in the time to come here. Just want to give a quick shout out to the people on Zapstream. I don't know if it's working. It looks super laggy to me. 3.2 FPS, critical stream. I don't know what's going on. The last couple times I've tried to stream on there, it's been brutal. I'm gonna maybe check that out later, but Moravian zapped 1,000 sats and said hi there. Appreciate that. And my name is Steve, says Yo Forest. Great to see you guys on Zapstream. Hopefully it's working for you. For me, it looks like it's not, but we'll figure that out later. AG, the new MSTR. Yes, exactly. Took 172.5 covered calls for MSTR this morning. So far, so good. Are you in anything? Yeah, I sold last week. I sold covered calls expiring this Friday. So it was like a week and a half out, and I sold 170. So we'll see. I was a little bit worried, but it's sort of like on Sunday I was a little bit worried. I'm not worried ever because I can always just continue to roll into the future. But I was thinking, well, those covered calls might get in the money because Bitcoin's at 90K. And I look at it this morning, it's back at 87. So it's, that Sunday fake pump or the Sunday fake dump, one or the other. Silver market doesn't seem real. Silver has no monetary use case, usurped by gold. Yeah, and I think that's part of it, right? Is the store of value function, the scarcity is there to some degree with silver, but it's not a lot. And that narrative, if people are buying into it for the narrative of the monetary premium use case, I think that that erodes. I think that narrative erodes, and I think that the silver holders will basically rely on tech to bail them out by demanding more silver for the industrial use case. Silver is an industrial metal, and I think trying to make it a monetary metal um, is not going to be a long-term strategy, right? And again, there's a trade here, and there has been a trade here already, and people have done very well with that. But I'd be very cautious in this environment if I was heavy into silver. I updated the firmware for my Jade about a week and a half before the news came out about the Jade vulnerability. Do you know when they released the update to address the issue? That's a good question. I'm not 100% sure when they released the new firmware update that addresses the vulnerability. And I can't remember off the top of my head what the number is. I think it's 1.08 or something like that. I would recommend checking out my video, and then just checking your firmware to see if it is the newest one. If it's not, you should update it. Yeah, I would recommend that. I haven't checked my Jade yet, but everything was fine. I turned on my Jade and updated it before the issue. Yeah, and everything will be fine, right? There has been no cases of people actually having this exploit happen to them. So yeah. Thoughts on nunchuck custody solutions worth the money? I think it's about $120 a year to get the custody solution with the multi-sig and inheritance planning with nunchuck. They don't require any sort of KYC, and they hold one key for you, so it makes it really easy to sign transactions since you only need one of your other key solutions to do a 2 out of 3 multi-sig. I think it's a great solution, actually. I think it's one of the best multi-party custody solutions out there for a simple multi-sig. I think the DIY multi-sig to save the 120 a year is worth it for people to do if they can do a multi-jurisdictional, if they can secure their own multi-sig really well, if they're okay at needing 2 signing devices to sign a transaction, if they're kind of thinking this is long-term cold storage, never sort of touch it kind of thing. I think the third party being involved in there doesn't really add that much value. But 120 a year is not that much for a really great custody solution, in my opinion. So yeah, it's definitely worth the money. But that being said, I don't think it's right for every single person. I think it's right for specific people with specific needs. But it definitely worth the money for the right people. Which is why Schiff had to come up with tokenized gold so he can at least have some kind of argument in a debate. Yeah, tokenized gold is absolute bullshit. It's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. I mean, that's what led to fiat as we know it today, right? That was tokenized gold. We originally got gold backed bank certificates that you could take to a bank and redeem for the gold in their vault. And that just eventually led to, oh, well, we actually issued more of those than the gold we have. And the government did that en masse to go to war. And then they confiscated people's gold to fill up their reserves. And then they said, well, foreign nations can redeem it, but the people within our own country can't, which that was fiat right there, right? And then it just, to take people to the speculators are attacking the dollar. And it was just, 1971, right? Nixon shock. Tokenized gold is the dumbest idea in the world. Maybe not the dumbest, but it's pretty dumb. It's pretty dumb. As of January 1st, 2026, China is restricting silver exports. U.S. put it on a critical minerals list. 1.5 million physical available versus 7.5 million contracts that could ask for delivery. Yeah. So this is what I was mentioning about global trade partners. Brett's got the receipts here. I didn't have the exact information. Yeah, it's China is restricting silver exports. Now, what happens if an agreement is made, right? I mean, these are risk vectors that people are kind of thinking are good for them because the restricting of that creates an inelastic market, and potentially, if there's demand and the supply isn't able to meet that, right? But what happened? I mean, is it not possible that China restricts these silver exports? I think the U.S., like, if silver continues to go up and it becomes a problem for U.S. centric companies, I think there's going to be massive incentives for the U.S. government to incentivize some sort of agreement, right? Um, so, I mean, we'll see, right? U.S. puts on critical minerals list. Yeah, okay. So all of these things combined, right, are the narrative to push the price up, or to tell the story of why the price has already gone up, right? And the people that knew these things ahead of time or positioned themselves were smart enough to know before the rest of the market, before we're trying to figure out the story in real time here, or after the fact, actually, not real time. Physical available versus 7.5 million contracts. Yeah, and there's also this other thing too, where supposedly demand for the industrial and monetary case of silver has outpaced the issuance or the mining of silver for quite a while. Um, I just watched a video about it. It was 200,000 tons. Don't quote me. I don't know. It was like a margin of like 20% per year outpaced. And so a lot of that was being filled by not mining silver, but from recycling silver, from selling jewelry, from from bank coffers, being sort of the physical silver that was requested and needed. So that kind of environment can only last for so long as well, where there's outpaced demand for something, right? Um, and it sort of was being the demand was sort of being or the supply was being subsidized in some way. And what happens when that subsidy dries up, right? Canada, we sold all of our gold. I think we're like one of the only, or the only G7 country or something that has no gold reserves. America doesn't have any silver reserves either, I don't believe. So they can't really do this thing where what Biden did with the strategic petroleum reserve, where they just started issuing it into the market and selling it to lower or try to lower the fuel costs. They can't do that with the silver market because I don't believe they have a strategic silver reserve. So there is sort of this perfect storm that has brewed. And now the question is, has it brewed? Is it at the peak of its storm? Is the window shutting, is in my analogy, my initial analogy there, or is it going to continue getting worse, right? Is the demand for silver going to increase? Is the supply of silver going to decrease? Um, I don't know, but I do agree with you here with your second part of your sentence, which is it's all better than fiat. 100% agree with that. 100% agree with that. Here you. Okay, let's see. Damn, switched. It died. Switched to YouTube. Yeah, we're at 5. Damn, I don't even know what's going on. This is the same thing that happened last time. Edit stream info. I even lowered my resolution. Let's see. Yeah, I'll have to take a look at Zapstream later and fix that again. Apologize for anybody that was over there that was trying to watch. Like, there's 5 viewers on there right now. You're just looking at pixels. Can you explain again briefly what rolling and covered call means? So when you're selling covered calls, you're selling a covered call, and somebody buys that, and they're buying it basically as a bet, or they're buying it as a hedge, or speculation that the price is going to reach your strike price of that contract that you sold before the time of expiry, or at least become profitable based on those metrics and implied volatility as well, Vega. The whole time negating the time decay, as time is another value metric of what makes that contract valuable. So for instance, if you sold a covered call like I did of MSTR for expiring on Friday, this Friday at 170. That's a real covered call that I have in the market right now. If MSDR rockets up to 200, right? My covered call is now $30 into the money. So whoever bought that from me is on the positive side of the trade and I'm on the negative. So my I would have a loss on that, right? I would have captured the premium off the get-go, but I would now have a negative on that as far as it closing out and my shares getting called away from me at $170 a share when they're trading on the market at 200. So I'm not in a great situation there. Now, what you can do with covered calls is you can buy the contract back that you sold. So even though the contract price has gone up because it's now in the money instead of out of the money, you can buy it back and then you can look and to sell another covered call further down the in time. So weeks from now, like another week from now or a month from now, and because it has more time to it, time being part of the equation of what makes a options contract valuable, you've increased the value proposition of the new contract that you are selling. So you're buying back the one that you initially sold at a loss, but then you can sell another one further out in time at whatever strike price you want. And you kind of try to match that. So one thing you could do is you could, if you think, okay, well, I was wrong, there's a bullish direction of this. I actually want to buy my contract back, sell another one further out in time, but also higher up in strike price. So I can start climbing back up to the strike price of what it's currently trading at. So that's something you can do. And you can still do that at a premium depending on the other variables like the volatility. So that's something you could do with options, and you can just kind of continue to do that until the share price goes back below and that new option that you rolled into is in the money, is expiring worthless. Bitcoin adoption is inevitable. I 100% agree with this, but I do think it's going to take I think it's going to take longer than a lot of people think. It's kind of like that thing. It's like you you miscalculate what you can do in a day, or you undervalue what you can do in a day. I don't know. You overvalue. Man, I wish I knew quotes. You overvalue what you can do in a day, and you undervalue what you can do in a year, kind of thing. I think it's going to take a while. I think it's happening underneath the scenes, and I think this kind of price action, it definitely pushes the tourists out, the tourists that are in it only for the fiat gains, and it actually just, you know, gets rid of a little bit of the noise, right? The noise starts going into the silver market and the silver sellers, right? That again, that's all I'm seeing. But then the Bitcoin content that comes through is a little bit more concentrated. It's, oh, okay, I'm building this wallet. I'm a non-KYC exchange. We're pushing for Bitcoin as payments. These kind of things, right? People say the building in the bear, right? And I don't think we're in a bear market. Yeah, I don't think we're in a bear market at all. I think we're just trading sideways until the sellers are run out, right? This is what happens with markets is it doesn't just there isn't some abrupt thing that's going to happen with Bitcoin. Again, we're kind of going to probably Bitcoin's price is going to rocket up at some point. And we're going to create some narratives to understand that. But that entire time until then, what's happening is sellers are exhausting, right? There's only so much available sellers at certain prices. Right now, we have sellers willing to sell at 90,000. What happens when people are saying, well, I sold my Bitcoin, I'm just going to hold it. I bought it at 125. I'm going to wait till it goes to 125. I still believe in it. I'm just going to hold it. Or all of those people are gone, right? And they're just, okay, well, I'm going to wait until it's 100,000, right? Sellers get exhausted and then the price just moves because there is this underlying bid for Bitcoin. There's the bid from all the institutions, all the pension funds, everything. There's the bid from you and me, right? Every single 2 weeks, we might get a paycheck, and a certain portion of that is buying Bitcoin, and that's the bid, right? And eventually, the sellers that are in it for short-term gain will just get exhausted, and Bitcoin runs out at every price. That's something Rajat says, and it's almost that saying, it almost sounds it sounds too simple to really be meaningful. But if you think deeper on the fact that Bitcoin runs out at every single price, what does that actually mean? It means that Bitcoin is going to infinity fiat dollars. That's what that means at a certain point. Thoughts on Andreas Antonopoulos supporting Core? Um, I mean, each to their own, right? He's got a checkered past in my eyes. He's an incredible communicator and educator of Bitcoin. He also wrote a book called what was it? Understanding Ethereum or something. What was this book? Mastering Ethereum. I mean, a lot of people were sort of involved in Ethereum being sort of this playground where they could mess around with smart contracts and different things where we can keep Bitcoin more pure. So you cut him some slack there because of time, because of the time frame that happened in and everything. And again, I do think that he was one of the best Bitcoin educators ever. He's goated. He's goated. Does that mean that he knows everything about knock-on effects of consequences of changing policy? No. But I've also, to some degree, kind of recognized and realized that what has happened from Core 30, right? Core 30 has been largely adopted. What has happened from that? I'm not so sure. We're talking about soft fork implementations now to actually really make a dent at spam. These things will create fear in the market of spammers, which is great. And if any of them are actually implemented, will create massive real effects. So I think the conversation about knots versus core is over at this point. And I think that a lot of people are still, talking about filters and running knots and protect the network and stuff like that. And I think that's done. I think that's over. Um, that doesn't mean that it doesn't matter that core changed the default policy. And I think that it is easier to get larger op returns in. I think it will have an effect on Bitcoin, but there's no stopping that now. Is it something that I wanted to happen? No, I was definitely on the not side. I think that it didn't make sense that Core was changing its filters so fast. But the conversation has shifted now. We're now talking about soft fork implementations. That's the new fight here. So yeah, I don't really have that much to say around his support of Core or not. Silver is so abundant. Yeah, it is. And it's very interesting, the silver mining, how it's just a byproduct. There's very few actual like silver miners out there, which is partially potentially why there's going to be a lag effect of inelasticity of the market, right? Because these silver miners, if there were many of them, would be the ones that would be able to ramp up production a lot. It's sort of being a byproduct of other mining operations means that them ramping up their production is going to affect the market of silver. It's going to create more supply, but it's not necessarily such a direct response. A company had tokenized gold around 2017, 2018. A few people raved about it. Then the main guy ran away with all the money people invested. Sadly, you still have to trust a human to buy and hold the gold. It's still enforced in the physical world, is what you're saying. So there's absolutely no reason to have it. And exactly, tokenized gold is just reinventing paper. Yep, ShakePay is only available in Canada. That's true. If you're in the States, you got many options that are very similar. Um, yeah, U.S. produces thousands tons of silver annually. Yeah, I was wrong about my math there about um, but I think the percentage was correct. It was around 20% difference between the amount of supply from mining and the amount of demand. But the tonnage that I had was totally wrong. I've waited 10 plus years for silver to do something. I'm happy. I'm happy. Wait again for Bitcoin. I will only allocate in Bitcoin these days. Yeah, that's where I'm at as well, right? Like it would have been smart for me to have held my SLV position that I bought 3 years ago. That would have been a great trade. Would have been a great trade. But I sold that and I bought Bitcoin with it. So I'm not that upset about it. And I think probably I'm like net on that actually. But Bitcoin is just something I believe way more in. So yeah. We're at 50 minutes here, guys. I really appreciate all the comments. This has been a fun one. Um, yeah, we're gonna do a couple more tosses in the Bitcoin wishing well, and then I'll just answer a couple final questions if there are any. So the wishing well here is a way for you to win some free sats. Somebody actually won 210,000 satoshis one time. So don't sleep on this. We've done a lot of tosses in here that are only a few hundred sats, and I know that's not super meaningful today, but the possibility of hitting pretty big sats is a lot here. So get out your Lightning wallets. First person to scan this QR code that's about to pop up on stream will win whatever sats we win. If you don't want to compete for this, because only one person will win this 524 sats, you can actually use my link in the description to sign up for Bitcoin Well. And I believe you get 5 free tosses in the wishing well. 3 or 5, I can't remember. They might have changed it. A lot of these, reward programs do end up just kind of being rapidly changed and stuff. So, but you do get some free tosses in wishing well. Not much free Bitcoin going around, so capitalize on that. It's my belief that this is going to be worth infinite amount of fiat dollars, but bare minimum, you can just think about that eventually being worth 524. And we're gonna do one more, and I noticed Nav's got a question there. We're gonna address that. I also have a QR code up on the screen there that's on the side. Where is it? Let me just see. This side? Oh yeah, I'm little. 485 sats for this one. That QR code is actually a donation system. So if you guys want to donate to the show, if you got any value out of this, you feel like you want to support my channel in any way, you can send over some sats through that. And again, that's a QR code and the Lightning. You just scan that, send some sats. You can attach a message, basically like the Bitcoin equivalent of a super chat on YouTube. And that goes a long way. That all supports the show. And actually, last week we got 420 sats from with a note that said "Great stream, Canon," which I got after the show ended. So, or at least I looked at it after the show. So I did not read it out last stream. Okay, couple questions here, or one question here from Nav. Which multi-sig setup do you recommend 2 of 3? Yeah, 2 of 3 is great. I don't recommend. I think the complexity of setups gets too much after that. I think for a very short term, yeah, I wouldn't. I'm going to skip actually that conversation I was going to get into. I think the easiest way to do a multi-sig in a very robust setup is to use Nunchuck or to use Sparrow and to use 3 cold cards. Now, you do open yourself up to one vulnerability by using 3 cold cards, which is a single vendor, right? You're trusting cold card that there's nothing wrong with their random number generator, that there's no backdoor, there's no problems with their hardware. So to mitigate that, but to add a slight degree of complexity, you could use another. You could switch that up. So you would use multi-vendor is the idea there. So one cold card queue, one one foundation passport, one keystone, or one Trezor. Uh, Try to keep it open source, try to keep it air gapped. But again, any single so any one of those has its pros and cons to it. But when you use all of those together, the single vulnerabilities or the slight downside to one of them is offset, considering that you need multiple of those devices or multiple of the keys to sign a transaction. So even though a Trezor is an air gapped, if you're just using it as one key, it ends up not being such a massive problem. Yeah, and Philip here has Jade as a suggestion too. I would say there's a lot of people now with this vulnerability that's come out with Jade that is thinking, "Oh, what do I do with this thing? Toss it in the garbage, crush it. I'm not messing around with anything that could go wrong. I'm going to switch to cold card, whatever." Okay, keep the Jade, use it as part of a multi-sig. It is slightly less convenient than the cold card as far as its functionality, as far as having to. I've actually had some issues with my Jade just connecting to the Oracle and unlocking it and stuff. I had to do a factory reset and just get it set up again. I find it works way better on the app on the phone than on the desktop. I don't know what's going on there. A little bit of annoyingness with my Jade, I will say. But I'm basically switched over to the cold card as my main driver here, especially for like a single sig setup. And yeah, the Jade is fine as part of a multi sig. Again, any of those would be fine. People do get the multi sig setup from CoinKite or Cold Card, where they get a queue and they get 2 tap signers. This is a really good option, but I will just say that if you don't think about it too much, you'll just think, okay, that's great. I can just use 2 of my tap signers and sign a transaction really, really easy. I don't have to type things in, all that. Now, the problem with that is those tap signers have an internal battery that lasts basically 5 to 7 years. There's also flash memory that only lasts that long too. But with having hardware devices that you could generate a seed phrase from, you can store that seed phrase on something that's going to last way longer than 5 to 7 years. So you can create a multi-sig that's going to last you generations. Now you want to check on your multi-sig and stuff every once in a while, make sure it's all good. But with the tap signer, you have no way of generating a seed phrase. So you are dependent on that working. And if one of those stops working, okay, well, you still have another one and your cold card, which you can back up and recover anyway, and you can sign a transaction. But what happens if both of those stop working? There's no way to recover the private key that was stored on both of those individually, right? Each one of those has their own private key, master private key. So you're putting a lot of trust in something that has a failure point. So I would just suggest that if you're going to use a tap signer, use it as one key, not 2, and have 2 hardware wallets that can generate seed phrases that you can store on titanium or encrypted using super backed or something like that, that you can recover in case the flash memory, in case the hardware wallet gets stolen, broken, destroyed, lost, whatever. So I would suggest using 1 tap signer at most. If you're going to use 2, you're going to need to move your multi-sig, set up a a calendar event 4 years in the future to make sure that you're resetting a new multi-sig using brand new tap signers if you want to continue to use that. That would just be my suggestion there. Great stream. Nice to see you. Thank you for your insights on gold there, or on silver. Sorry. So which setup 2 of 3? Yep. 2 of 3 is what I would do. And I would use at least 2 hardware wallets, different vendors. Look at the approved list on Nunchuck is actually pretty good. They have an approved list for devices. So just download Nunchuck on your phone and initiate the multi-sig setup, and then it's going to come up with a list of all the different devices that work with them. I would say all of those devices are going to work pretty well. I would avoid Ledger at all costs, but a lot of people have an old Ledger laying around, and you do have to use the desktop version or Sparrow if you're going to use something like that. And again, what do I mean approved? I mean, they built out the software on their on their mobile wallet to facilitate those wallets really easily. You can use generic wallets as well, but basically they've created their software to one press, just like in Sparrow, like it comes up with a list of all sorts of like Jade, Cold Card, and then it imports it and knows what is what. Basically, the same thing happens with Nunchuck, and those are all decent wallets that are on there. Again, the Keystone's on there, the Cold Card, the Tap Signer, the Trezor Foundation, and I believe a couple other ones as well. What is your best way to secure seeds, durability, longevity, and whatnot? I would say a multitude of different ways is the best way. Paper is okay, but you want to have something that's also not paper, right? You want to have titanium, right? I use the Stampseed kits; they're great, and there's 15% off using my code actually in the description to get those. I like them because they have mounting holes on them, so you could mount them somewhere really hidden. And then you could also have paper backups as well, as a bookmark in one of your books or something like that, right? Get creative with that. Multiple different seed phrase backups, but also having multiple passphrase backups as well, so that you're not going to have the single point of vulnerability of somebody stumbling upon your seed phrase and recovering it and getting your Bitcoin. So you have to have a passphrase on that, in my estimation, or what I would suggest. Yep, multi-sig is for sophisticated users, so it's not for the faint of heart. You definitely want to do a lot of research. I would advise actually getting somebody to help you with it initially. I actually do that for people as well. I help people with multi-sigs. I think it's worth it, especially for setting it up for the first time, to get some help. I don't. Why would you risk doing something wrong with Bitcoin? It just doesn't make any sense to me. Just pay some money to get some help. You're going to save yourself a lot of headache, a lot of potential problems by doing so. Tiny Seed, I think maybe is it Microseed that you're talking about? Microseed is a good solution. They have a nylon washer that's really cool. Yeah, I would suggest that as well. I think that's a great option. The nylon keeps it away from people being able to metal detect it. Again, it's not fire resistant at that point, but having multiple different options is going to be good for you. My Jade Plus is still unusable. Network error, failed communicating with Oracle. How did you fix this? I didn't see that error. I never got that error, but I believe that's what was going on with me as well. There was an outage. Again, this is the Oracle system is interesting and it works, but it has its problems. So, Tiny Seed is a European company. Okay, interesting. I've never heard of Tiny Seed. So I used the app instead, and I got no errors, and it worked totally fine. So I would suggest trying that and seeing if that works. Yeah, Maple Bitcoin is this week. We did skip last week with very, very short notice to our people in our community, but we tried to the last minute. We tried to get things organized, but there was just too much going on with each one of us. All had different availability with holiday week and everything. So we are doing Maple Bitcoin this Friday, and we'll see you guys there. And 3 videos this week: Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is my release schedule for pre-recorded videos. I got some really interesting ones. I have one about the Tangem, which is I keep always get people talking about the Tangem card. I discussed what Tangem is all about and the many, many problems of Tangem, and a couple other ones as well. I've been working on something sort of behind the scenes that I don't even know why I brought it up, because I'm not going to tell you guys about it. But I have been working hard on something coming out very, very soon, hopefully. It's a lot of work, so maybe it won't be that soon, but it'll be pretty big development for the channel. And again, appreciate you all for tuning in, and we will see you on the next live stream every single Monday, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time and 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time this Friday with Rajat and Jor. Thanks, everybody. See you guys.